Hello and welcome to our grammar class on active and passive voice. To understand these terms, first we need to take into account that, according to English grammar, the verb has five properties: person, number, mood, tense, and voice. Now we will focus on the voice aspect, which is the relation between the subject and the verb in a sentence. So we have active voice, in which the subject acts upon the verb, and we have passive voice, in which the verb acts upon the subject. To sum it up then, active voice is when the subject is acting, that is, doing or performing the verb's action. Here are some examples of active voice. Yoongi likes tangerines. Taehyung ordered fried chicken. I love BTS. All these sentences follow the construction subject, verb, object. In the first sentences, we can see the subject Yoongi performs the action described by the verb like. In the second sentence, Taehyung performs the action described by order. And in the third sentence, the subject I performs the action described by the verb love. All of these examples clearly show that the subjects are the one actively doing the action described by the verb. Now we will go on to passive voice.
Hello everyone, this is Josué speaking, and as you can see, I'm going to talk to you guys about passive voice and when to use it. So what is passive voice? A sentence is in the passive voice when the subject is acted upon by some other performer of the verb. This means that unlike active voice sentences where the subject is the one performing directly the action expressed by the verb, with passive voice sentences the subject is the one receiving the action instead of performing it. Passive sentences are usually structured as it follows, with a subject, a conjugated form of the verb to be, a past participle of a transitive verb, and an optional prepositional phrase. To illustrate that, here we have some examples. The boy was beaten by the dog, the ball was kicked by Chester, and this class is being presented by first-year students. Notice that in each of the examples, the structure that was previously mentioned is shown with the blue parts being the subject of each sentence, the green parts the conjugated form of to be and the past participle, and the brown parts the prepositional phrase. In this case, with passive voice sentences, the prepositional phrase is the one expressing who's performing the action described by the verb, and it's said to be optional because it can either be stated or omitted altogether without losing the overall idea of the sentence. When and when not to use the passive voice. So if you're writing anything with a definitive subject who's performing an action, you'll be better off using the active voice. Using the active voice conveys a strong, clear tone, while the passive voice is subtler and weaker. So when it comes to academic writing especially, the use of active voice is preferred because it makes the meaning clear for the readers and keeps the sentences from becoming too complicated or wordy. And we have two examples to express the same idea, one in the passive voice and the other one in active voice. The first, action on the bill is being considered by the committee, and the second, the committee is considering action on the bill. The first sentence is in passive voice and can be considered to be less concise than its active counterpart. The active voice sentence requires fewer words to communicate the same idea, which is why it is considered to be more direct and concise, because the subject is the one performing the action directly. That said, there are times when the passive voice does a better job of presenting an idea, especially in certain formal, professional, and legal discussions. Here are some common uses of the passive voice. Reports of crimes or incidents with unknown perpetrators. Example, my car was stolen yesterday. In this case, the passive voice emphasizes the stolen item and the action of theft, and given the fact that we don't know who the perpetrator is, the focus is on the action. 2. Scientific context. Example, the rod was placed into a T-shaped maze. In this case, the one performing the action is not as relevant as the experiment that is being conducted. Therefore, the use of passive voice is preferred. Third, when you want to emphasize an action itself and the doer of the action is irrelevant or distracting. Example, the president was sworn in on a cold August morning. Again, the emphasis is on the action and the one receiving it, in this case, the president. So to sum it up, in the passive voice, the subject is acted upon. In other words, it receives the action expressed by the verb. Forming the passive voice requires the verb to be and the past participle. The agent performing the action might appear in a prepositional phrase or might be omitted. Use the active voice if it makes your sentence sound clearer and more natural, and use the passive voice when the person or thing receiving an action is the important part of the sentence. And to finish, I leave you guys with a tip. When it comes to academic writing, don't be passive, even if your sentences sometimes need to be. And now Taide is going to talk to you guys about how to change from active to passive voice.
How to change from active voice to passive voice. In order to recognize that a sentence is in passive voice, you can watch out for these keywords. Most of the times, sentences with these words are in passive voice, so you can use them to change voice from active to passive. So, to change from active voice to passive voice, we move the object to the beginning of the sentence. Sentences in the active voice typically begin with the subject and describe the action it does to the direct object. To achieve passive voice, switch this placement by moving the direct object to the beginning, which will highlight it and its reception of the verb. For example, the sentence, "They receive a Grammy" is in present simple tense and active voice. To change this to passive voice, we move the direct object to the beginning of the sentence while keeping the present simple tense. That way, our sentence ends up being, "A Grammy is received by them." So we add the auxiliary verb be before the main verb. Adding be will make the active verb passive. In this case, the verb is in present simple, so we add the verb is. Finally, we need to add the preposition by before the subject. The subject should come at the end of the passive voice sentence. When including the word by late in the sentence, the subject is added after the direct object and verb have already been clarified. That pretty much sums up our lecture on active and passive voice. We recommend you to pause the video and pick a few sentences, identify whether they are active or passive, and convert them to the other form. Many thanks to Jesús Barrios, Cristhian Vega, and Josué Benítez for all of their hard work. This is Taide Appleyard, and thank you for watching.